Welcome to part 2 of Lily's best book recommendations ever, aka July favorites, aka the longest video ever. Thanks for coming back. Let's get started. You guys know me, I'm the first to acknowledge that good health isn't just about nutrition. So I'm gonna share with you some of my favorites, like psychological, psycho-emotional, super healing, yummy, good books, right? My first and simplest one is Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. My dad gifted me this book when I think he first started realizing that I had serious anxiety problems, but he and I weren't really close enough that I would let him into that to be able to have any influence on it because we were still cut off because my mom had told me that he was an evil bastard for my whole life. But anyway, this is not the exact copy he gave me. I picked this up at a used bookstore sometime after, but it has these, just like 1 to 1.5 page little quick doodads that you can read, and it teaches you a nice lesson about like being a kind person and not getting stressed out over the small, tedious stuff that always feels like it's such a big deal, but it's really not a big deal in the scheme of life, because what's most important is the relationships that we have and the people that we love and our ability to connect with other human beings and animals and the planet and ourselves, and all the other stuff just gets in the way of that. So this is a great book. It just, it always reminds me to get back to what really matters. And I go through and I'll read one of these to the girls every now and then, and I know that their little brains probably don't really absorb it, but something gets in there and I feel like it matters. One of my favorite authors for emotional depth is Mark Nepo, because he really acknowledges that spirituality and healing is not a pretty process. In fact, it's very painful and it's very scary, and it can feel really disgusting at times to reach that deeply into ourselves and into the dark recesses of our soul where we hold these sometimes horribly cruel beliefs about ourselves that do not serve us and do not improve our lives in any way. In fact, quite the opposite. So his work was really instrumental to me when I was falling apart and really sad and really hurt and dealing with so much trauma in my past life and trying to come to terms with that and trying to figure out if I could ever be a whole or happy human being after everything that I had been through. Still waiting for that answer. No, I'm just kidding. I'm so happy. The next two, I've really been getting back into the yoga philosophy. When I first did my yoga teacher trainings, it was very much I was very much an emotional mess. It was before the Mark Nepo stuff. Whew. And I was very dismissive of it because I didn't get it. If you're not at a certain level emotionally or spiritually, you read this shit and you're like, what does that even mean? What are you trying to say? How do I apply that to dealing with assholes that I meet every single day of my life? So it takes some time, but this, I think, is my favorite book that I've ever read on the Yoga Sutras, and it breaks down the Yoga Sutras in a really beautiful and accessible way. I still get to, sutras where I read it and I'm like 5 or 10 years or decades or lifetimes away from being able to understand this, because I'm just not there yet. But there are others that are very poignant, and I really get a lot from, the more I read these books and the other spiritual books, the more I realize that spirituality and religion and new agey woo-woo, we are all saying the same thing. We just choose different words and different metaphors to describe it. And essentially what it comes back to is try to be a nice person. Keep an eye on yourself. Keep an eye on your brain and where it goes. Try not to judge yourself or other people. And I'm always so shocked by the elaborate ways that we find to say, try not to be such an asshole all the time. That's my spiritual doctrine, Just try not to be such an asshole all the time. This book, The Power of Habit, I actually listened to on audiobook, and then we got a physical copy of it as well, just because it's really good. This one helped me a lot as well with understanding how to break addictions and how to break my addictive patterns, because the trap that I found myself in so many times is like, okay, I'm gonna stop smoking, so I start drinking more. Then, okay, I'm gonna stop drinking, so I start binging on food more. Okay, I'm gonna stop binging, so then I don't have a way to deal with my obsessive, ridiculous levels of anxiety. So what this helped me do is kind of understand how a habit has certain patterns to it. And if you want to break a habit, even if that's an addiction, you have to not only stop that behavior, but you have to replace it with a new behavior to take its place. And even though I hadn't read the book when I did it, it was really a solid confirmation that, oh, okay, that's why I was able to stop binging. Because when I stopped binging, I found other ways to deal with my problems and other ways to spend my time. This book was both very enjoyable and kind of heartbreaking, because I realized that all of those people that told me that I was a special, talented young girl had no idea what they were talking about, and probably ruined my life. I had such a screwed up expectation of what it took to succeed. Anyway, this book is all about how talent, like natural talent and natural abilities that you don't really have to work for, doesn't really exist. It's mostly about hard work and dedication and persistence. And that is definitely something that I now purposefully bring to my life, where I look at my life all the time, different aspects of my life, and I think, wow, this is not where I want to be. I am so unimpressed with what I've been able to achieve here. And then I can take that, and instead of beating myself up or comparing myself to other people, I kind of realize that, well, you know, in the scheme of things, I'm still in the early days of this, and, you know, who knows where I'll be in 10 years. I'm just going to keep working at it and keep building at what I'm doing, and keep educating myself and keep holding myself to a higher standard, not only academically, but morally and ethically and personally. And eventually, I'm gonna look back and be really impressed with what I've been able to do. I still do that now. I like to take a moment and step back and look at what I've been able to accomplish in my life and how much I've changed, and I'm always really proud and impressed with myself. Sometimes disappointed in myself too, because I've backslided or been such an asshole all the time. But hey, we do our best, right? These two are by the same author, and I have to say she is incredibly adept at getting to the root of what's really going on. And these two books, like, I bought them because I have stepdaughters, and I really tried to get Levi to read one of them with me. He didn't. Maybe one day. But reading this was actually really helpful for me in reparenting myself, which is something that might sound crazy to those of you who didn't grow up with abusive parents, but when you have grown up with abusive parents and they have screwed with your head so thoroughly, a big part of the healing process, in my opinion, for me, is learning how to reparent myself. So if I screw up, instead of giving myself a thorough tongue lashing and calling myself stupid and shameful and, oh, Lily, I cannot believe you did that, what is wrong with you, like my mom used to, I go back and instead apply one of the thought processes presented in this book, whereby I say, Lily, what's going on with you? Like, what caused you to do this? What feeling or belief system is shaping your behavior to create this kind of action? And you don't have to be ashamed of it. You know, you might have done something bad, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. But I'd like, for your sake and for everyone else's sake, for you to do better in the future. And the only way that that's going to happen is if we talk about this in a non-judgmental way, with kindness and compassion and the intent to genuinely connect, like person to person or just with yourself, and acknowledge what's going on here. Several other books that have been so helpful to me in understanding this process and in understanding the difference between guilt and shame and how pathological shame is and how valuable vulnerability is to our lives have been the books by Brené Brown. And I have all of her books digitally. I don't know why I never ended up getting physical copies. I think because I wanted it right away and I wouldn't wait. The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, her other new one, and then she's writing one right now that I'm so excited to read. But Brené Brown is such a gifted, sincere, authentic author. The way that she communicates her ideas is incredible, very powerful, and they've made such a difference to my life and my well-being. She also has lots of great TED Talks and interviews. Basically, like, anytime I'm feeling kind of down in the dumps or just generally crappy, I'll flick on, one of her hour-and-a-half long interviews or podcasts and just listen to her speak, and invariably I do end up feeling a little bit better, at least for 20 minutes. But she's full of insight. And I just wish that she was vegan, Like, I wish that she could take that vulnerability and compassion talk and really, like, expand her horizons with that. But hey, maybe Dr. Melanie Joy can talk to her one day. That would be great. This book, I mean, it's not a novel. It's not like a good read. But if there's something wrong with you, you can just pop it open, and it has, like, a bunch of different disorders, like cystic fibrosis. And then it tells you about cystic fibrosis. And then it tells you how you diagnose it and what the treatments are and what you tell the family and what supplements you should think about taking. And because it is put out by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, everything is based off of a whole food, plant-based diet with other specific recommendations. So this book is a really powerful little reference guide, especially if you are like me and you get all kinds of random questions about random diseases and you're like, and I'll go through and say like, oh, what does this book say is good for cystic fibrosis? Oh, okay, interesting. And then I'll get this book and I'll be like, what does this book say is good for cystic fibrosis? Because I'm a big believer in herbal medicine. I'm not so big on pharmaceuticals, and I'm not so big on isolated nutrient supplements because they are so processed, but exposing my body to whole herbs for very specific medicinal purposes, I definitely do believe in, and that definitely has been really helpful for me, especially in dealing with stuff that isn't always as easy to get a handle on just by yourself through diet, like, my constant stress and anxiety and the hormone problems that result from that. Like, if I can herbally take the edge off that and help myself to get back into balance and then go off the herbs when I feel like I'm in a better place and able to manage it just on my own, then that's great. That's beautiful. And it's a lot better than taking Xanax and birth control pills. No judgment if you take Xanax and birth control pills, but they come with consequences. Speaking of stress and relaxing, this is the only yoga book I will ever recommend anyone because you can't learn much about the physical practice of yoga from yoga books. I don't care how good the author is, you really need like a face-to-face teacher who can describe anatomy and then help you translate that description into your actual body. But this book is about restorative yoga, and restorative yoga is one of the best things you can do for your health and well-being. If you are having trouble losing weight and you're one of those people that's like, oh my god, I'm too tired to exercise, but I'll force myself to go run on the treadmill for 60 minutes, I actually think you would be better off doing 60 minutes of this, which I call freestyle napping, where you put yourself into certain positions and then relax there for 5 to 10 minutes per posture, right? It has an amazingly healing effect on the endocrine system. I just can't stress enough how important it is to relax and renew your body. And my final book recommendation is kind of a cheater, and you can't actually read this, but my journal. I have this journal and I have like 8 other journals from the last 10 years of my life, and I have to say, I love going back and flipping through them. Sometimes it's really triggering because I read it and I'm like, oh, I was in such a bad time in my life. But I also did find that at those like horribly bad, deeply painful times in my life, I became very honest and very real with myself. And I have to say, I love reading that stuff because it reminds me who I really am and what's really important to me, and that I'm hilarious. And I appreciate hilarity. Hilarity and irony saved my life. It really did. So as much as I love to read, I also think that it's important to take time to record your own thoughts, especially if you're trying to heal from whatever life threw at you. Okay, everybody, so that is it for part 2. I am sincerely tired from talking, but nonetheless, I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Until then, make better choices for yourself and take really, really good care. I will see you all very soon. Bye.